there has to be some common sense.
Yes, sir. They have the car stopped at 10th and Ranch, Michael by there.
We still don't know who pulled the trigger. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Police Off the Cuff, Real Crime Stories. I'm your host, retired NYPD Sergeant Bill Cannon, a 27-year veteran of the NYPD. Folks, we've all been watching this show, this case with Scot Peterson, the Broward County school resource officer, who was charged with we feel highly inflated charges in regards to what can only be described as a failure to act, an act or acts of omission. And one of the things that we feel, or what we'll interject with two guests who are both attorneys, is that Scot Peterson, the school resource officer, was overcharged by, I guess, a prosecutor who was driven by politics, really. And we say that very softly because 17 people were killed in this incident in Parkland. And the school was a Marjorie Stoneham Douglas High School. So we can't put it any more harshly than that, because responding to an active shooting incident is an incident, or one of the worst things that could ever happen in policing. But in addition, just think of being a parent and having your kid murdered at the school that they attend. The school is a place where you're supposed to go and you're supposed to be safe. But at the same time, this case had national implications. And that, I mean, national implications, because what if police officers in any jurisdiction in this great country of ours could be charged criminally for acts of omission, failure to act, basically? How would that work out? And who's going to decide what is an act of omission and what constitutes omission? And obviously, the prosecutors in this case decided that they knew what omission was, and that they could determine that his omission was so serious that the resulting charges would be 7 counts of child neglect that was to be charged as a felony, and 3 counts of culpable negligence. These are very, very serious charges. However, we believe on this show that they were inflated charges. So as we learned a couple of days ago, a jury has acquitted on all counts the former school resource officer who stayed outside during the February 2018 massacre at Marjorie Stoneham Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida, absolving him of wrongdoing in the rare trial of a law enforcement officer for his response to a mass shooting. State prosecutors accused Peterson of ignoring his training and doing nothing as 17 people, including 14 students, were gunned down at the Stoneham Douglas High School in what remains the deadliest U.S. high school shooting ever. His attorney argued the then deputy didn't enter the school's 1200 building, the site of the attack, because he couldn't tell where the shots were coming from. The only person to blame was that monster, Peterson said of the shooter. It wasn't any law enforcement, nobody on the scene. From the BSO, the Coral Springs, everybody did the best they could. We did the best we could with the information we had. And God knows we wish we had more at that point. The 7 counts, this is according to CNN, the 7 counts of felony child neglect and 3 counts of culpable negligence each stem from the deaths and injuries of 8 students, 7 of them minors, and 2 employees on the 3rd floor of the 1200 building. Teacher Scott Beagle and students Meadow Pollock, Jamie Guttenberg, Carol Lockren, Joe Quinn Oliver, and Peter Wang all were killed, while teacher Stacy Lapel and students Anthony Borges, Kyle Lehman, and Marian Kabachenko were wounded and survived. Peterson was not charged in connection with the victims on the first floor because he had not yet arrived on the scene, and no one was killed on the second floor. He also faced a perjury charge for telling investigators afterward that he didn't see students fleeing the 1200 building and that he heard only 2 or 3 gunshots after arriving at the scene, while other witnesses said they heard more. The state claimed the evidence showed both statements were untrue. So let's get right into it. And to help me talk about this case tonight, I have 3 very, very experienced people are frequently on this show, and I introduce them one at a time. Straight out of Brooklyn, retired NYPD detective Phil Grimaldi. How you doing tonight, Phil?
I'm doing pretty good, Billy. How you doing?
I'm doing pretty well. You know, Phil, I'm going to take it one at a time till we introduce the others, but being charged with failure to act, what are the national implications of that? What do you think of that? And then we'll get into what Officer Peterson's actions were, if you can call them actions.
Well, Billy, failure to act, you and I discussed this before we went on the air. To us, it seemed like more of an administrative thing. From what we saw with regard to the trial, there was some video evidence played. It looked like he was panic-stricken. Shots were going off. He didn't enter the building. He claimed his lawyer made a statement that Peterson couldn't accurately detect where the shots were coming from. I guess that could be possible. Shots ringing off in the distance with echoes. Maybe you think they're coming from this direction, and in fact, they're coming from that direction. However, with the day and age that we live in, with active shooter drills, we're trained, police officers are trained to go towards the threat and to neutralize the threat. It appears that he didn't do that. Like I said earlier, it looked to me like he panicked. Whether or not that is a criminal act, I don't think. It's really tough because it's not like he didn't do anything. Did he radio for assistance and backup? Did he feel that it was a suicide mission to go into that school? I don't know what was going through his mind. Whatever he did to assess the situation at the moment that the shooting began, from what we see, it looks like he didn't act properly based on the protocols of this is 2018, but the modern day protocols of active shooter training. You're supposed to go in and you're supposed to go towards the threat. They're claiming about 4 minutes and 15 seconds passed where something could have been done before the shooter's gun likely jammed. The shooter wound up leaving the school and was captured minutes later. Outside of the school, he had gone to some location and got a soda. But the point that I bring that up is that it sounds like communication was so bad. EMS people were quoted as saying that they were told to stand down and not go into the school even after Nicholas Cruz was taken into custody. So again, a very chaotic situation. He made a judgment call not to go into the school. He claimed now that he didn't know where the shots were coming from. Whether or not that's true, it looks like, from a standpoint of doing the right thing, that he didn't do the right thing.
All right, with us tonight also, Phil, we'll get back to that because we're going to address more of his actions or lack thereof as the show progresses. We also have with us tonight attorney, mother of 5, actress, jack of all trades practically, and a great guest on the show, Melanie Little. Melanie, welcome to the show tonight.
Thank you so much for having me. You didn't call me always affable, which I've adopted.
Hey, I gotta change up every
I like
once
the
in a
always affable part.
I gotta change up every once in a while. I can't
about
be
this case.
predictable.
This is a tragic case, no matter which way you look at it. So,
Melanie, one of the first things I want to ask you about this, and we discussed it a little bit off the air, is that we'll put aside Officer Peterson's actions or inactions. The court's action. We felt, and I believe you probably feel, but you can speak much more articulately about the law than we can. Was he overcharged?
I mean, he was facing 100 years in jail. To me, that indicates that he was overcharged. And I think the jury may have had a really hard time with that. You know, the shooter pled guilty. He is serving multiple life sentences in prison. He will never see the light of day. But I feel like they just wanted to hold somebody else responsible for this heinous act as well. And I think they kind of overplayed their hand on this one. That's what I think. You know, there was a 4-month death penalty trial for Nicholas Cruz, who was the actual shooter. And the jury could not agree on the death penalty. They were deadlocked, so he did not receive the death penalty. But I mean, that's something else we can talk about. After this case, DeSantis signed a bill and changed the way the death penalty is handed out in Florida. There doesn't have to be a unanimous verdict anymore. So there's something that happened from this case that could be considered positive.
Melanie, I want you to comment on this comment by Milwaukee Civilian in the chat. Some call him the coward from Broward, but in DeShaney versus Winnebago and Warren versus District of Columbia, the Supreme Court has determined that police have no constitutional obligation to act. To me, that's scary, but that is the law, isn't it?
You know, it is. And it's a slippery slope, too, because where do you draw the line? You know, this was a massive high school. There were 3,300 students in this high school. This was not a one building high school like we see on Long Island. This was something like a 65-acre campus with multiple buildings. You know, there's a lot of facts here that I think, you know, and look, the jury deliberated for 20 hours. They watched 4 weeks of testimony. I think they know a lot more about this case than we do, being that they sat there for all of this time, listening to all of this evidence.
You know, Melanie, as much as I don't think Officer Scot Peterson did a good job or did his job that day, he was also a 31-year veteran that had a spotless record. Mm-hmm. And although I can't stick up for him for his inactivity that day, it's like the old expression, I've said it numerous times on this show, 1,000 attaboys don't equal one shit. And this was a big shit, you know? And by that, I mean, you know, attaboy, they tap you on the back. You make one mistake. But again, this was a huge mistake that resulted in 17 lives being lost.
And he has to live with that for the rest of his life.
You know something, Melly? And you're right. That's what I almost feel will be his punishment, is that let him have his pension. He's going to have to live with himself and the guilt of his inaction that day. With us tonight also is straight out of the Bronx, actually, Professor from Albertus Magnus, law degree, retired NYPD Sergeant, Professor Mike Geary. Mike, how you doing tonight?
Good, Billy. Thank you for having me on.
You know, Mike, I want to ask you also, I gave that question to Melanie, but I want to lay it on you too, because you're all, besides being an attorney, you're also a former member of the service, a retired NYPD Sergeant. Was he overcharged in this case?
Billy, he was, because, and I say that because under the Florida statutes that he was charged under, it's not clear that school resource officers are people who have a special relationship with students and are therefore statutorily required to act. It sounds a little strange, but I watched the defense's request to have the charges dropped completely at the end of the people of the state of Florida's case, and it's like a 30-minute hearing, and the judge was going back and forth with the prosecutor over what it meant to be a civil servant and be in custody of children, and being a civil servant and actually having a statutory duty to act. And what does the word causation mean? Because the judge was having trouble with that, and it was very, very clear from the defendant's motion that the judge reluctantly denied the defense's motion to throw out the charges even before the defense got to present their own witnesses. And so the law wasn't clear on who is statutorily responsible to act and who isn't. That will probably change now in states going forward. But yes, I agree that he was definitely overcharged.
You know, I want to play a little bit of this from ABC News, and this is some of the teachers and the students in regards to Officer Scot Peterson's actions or lack thereof.
Totally disgusted.
Shock and anger after this stunning admission from the sheriff's department yesterday.
What I saw was a deputy arrive at the west side of Building 12, take up a position, and he never went in.
Sheriff Scott Israel describing how Scot Peterson, an armed school resource deputy assigned to protect Stoneman Douglas High School, failed to take action. Peterson waiting outside for 4 minutes as the shooting unfolded.
Was he there when the shooter was still inside the building?
Yes, he was.
So what should he have done?
Went in, addressed the killer, killed the killer.
Cops know it's their responsibility to go in there, because we all know that in an active shooter situation, in the first couple of seconds, that's when most of the death occurs.
I'm Scot Peterson. I've been a police officer for 30 years.
The deputy in question, 54-year-old Scot Peterson, had worked at the school for 8 years.
Had you had any interaction with Scot Peterson? I Scott and I have talked many times over the years.
School internal documents painting a glowing picture of Peterson. In 2014, he was awarded School Resource Officer of the Year, commending him as reliable and handling issues with tact and judgment.
I knew right when I heard the cafeteria, you know, where you get the hairs on the back of your neck going up, I said, that never goes off.
And he's seen here addressing a school board meeting in 2015, describing his response to security scenarios.
So I ran into my trailer, I grabbed my firearm and my ID and my shorts and my sneakers, and I ran over, obviously, to the cafeteria. As I got to the cafeteria, sure enough, there were 4 males inside the cafeteria. They see me, they saw me peeking through the glass, they obviously fled. I chased them. I'm getting older, but I started chasing them.
Peterson caught those teens, but officials say on Valentine's Day, he did nothing.
You don't think about at school this stuff happening, but when it does, I feel like you need to be able to act on that and, you know, act as a police officer.
Facing suspension, Peterson opted to resign and retire. But the local union tonight told ABC News that Peterson did do a good job in calling the exact location and getting units out there, adding if first responders don't go into active shooting situations, they have failed.
It has to be something that you have to understand. You can't run away from the danger.
The response to Peterson's lack of action has been swift.
To hear that he didn't go into school is just, that's your job. That's what you signed up for. You signed up to protect our school.
Were you surprised? Shocked that someone trained with a gun. You know, I don't know all the ins and outs of the story, but if all of that is actually true, that's beyond comprehensible.
Even the president weighing in.
Deputy Sheriff Peterson, I guess his name is, he certainly did a poor job. But that's a case where somebody was outside, they're trained, they didn't react properly under pressure, or they were cowards.
A week and a half after the tragedy that claimed the lives of 17 students and teachers, Peterson's inaction just the latest in a string of mistakes and missed red flags coming sharply into focus. The FBI admitting last week that it failed to act on a tip. An anonymous female tipster telling the FBI that Cruz was going to explode. The tipster describing Cruz as a violent child who killed animals, posted about firearms and ISIS. She eventually even tells the FBI she worries about him getting into a school and just shooting the place up.
And we keep hearing every day about something new that was missed or something new that should have been done based on information that was reported to law enforcement.
But this was just one of dozens of concerns flagged to authorities.
Since 2008, the Broward Sheriff's Office was involved in 23 type calls involving the killer in some way, shape, or form, or his brother.
According to the Sheriff's Department, none of these incidents were arrestable under Florida law, but 2 calls are still under review.
911 emergency, how can I help you?
Yeah, there was a fight in my house. There's a kid and my son. I'm punching him, and now he left the house, but I need somebody here because I'm afraid he comes back and he has a lot of weapons. He put the gun in the head of his brother before, so it's not the first time, and he did that to his mom.
ABC News has obtained recordings of these frightening 911 calls made multiple times by the family who'd taken in Cruz after his mother died.
pretty scary, right? And something. When you hear that law enforcement had all these calls, I believe they said they went on 23 prior calls in regards to the shooter. And based on the law, they did all they could do, except, they should have confiscated his guns, I would think. I'm sure that they could look back on that and say we woulda, shoulda, coulda. But what I wanted to speak about also is the Broward County chief, who we just saw on the air, who that interview was done 8 days after this incident. I was a little disturbed at the fact that he didn't back his guy up with so soon after the incident. Like, couldn't he have said, "Look, it's still under investigation. We're waiting for more facts, and Circuit want to do before we throw him under the bus." He threw him under the bus 8 days after this event. Mike, what do you think?
Billy, he did, and that's sad because Scot Peterson brought out a defense witness who was a training officer and discussed the training that Scot Peterson actually received over the past couple of years, and and his attorney brought to light the fact that there's different protocol for different scenarios, and if an officer is by themselves, and they're awaiting backup, they are not required under their protocols to actually go into an active shooter scenario. They could wait for backup if they felt they needed to. So it wasn't absolute mandatory, according to their own rules and regulations, that he actually entered that building by himself. So, I think you're right. Chief, he's a public eye. He wants to make a good impression. He wants to sell out someone. He wants someone to pay. Nobody's talking about an FBI an informant who gave information to the Bureau, and that got lost. Nobody in the FBI is responsible for that. They were looking to, throw meat to the wolves. And
Scapegoat.
What's that?
Scapegoat.
Scapegoat. Exactly. Thank you. Thank you. It's the best way to say it. See, they scapegoated him. Absolutely.
But I was just a little amazed at how quickly he threw him under the bus. And just for everyone's information, Chief Scott Israel was fired by Governor DeSantis, I believe, over this incident. And so he threw someone under the bus. Look, Mike, you were a boss. I was a boss in the NYPD. One of the first things you learn is to back up your guys. Even sometimes when they do something not 100% correctly, it's not your job. It's your job to try to maybe correct it. What do they say? Praise publicly,
punish
punish privately. Yeah. Right. Oh, yeah. I never could get that little limerick. Praise publicly, punish privately. Right. And I tried to do that with my kids too, but that didn't always work.
Don't embarrass them.
What are your thoughts on this, Melanie? What do you think with his inaction? Again, we talked about how we don't feel it fit the threshold of charging him criminal, but there he has an out right there in their procedures, their actual police procedures, that he wasn't required to take action till the cavalry got there.
Yeah, that's one aspect of this. Another aspect of this is that if you look at the charges, neglect of a child, in order to criminally convict someone of that charge, you have to prove that they are a caregiver under the law. And I think this may be where the jury got hung up. And somebody mentioned this in the chat, so thank you for that. A caregiver under the law is defined as a parent, adult household member, or other person responsible for a child's welfare. If they did not find him a caregiver, they could not convict him of neglect of a child.
Again, overcharged because they wanted their meat on the hoof. And again, I cannot defend Officer Scot Peterson's actions. However, the reaction to what he neglected, for an act of omission. And I don't buy that he didn't know where the shots were coming from. I don't buy that at all. He had over 4 or 5 minutes to hear them and go into the building. And guess what? You'll hear them better if you go into the building. If you stand outside and look at the brick walls, you're not helping anybody. So I hate to be so harsh. And as I said earlier on, I'm glad that he's not going to prison. I'm glad that he got his pension. And if people are obsessed with his punishment, he's going to live with this for the rest of his life. And that is the most silent punishment you could possibly have. Phil.
Billy, I just want to make a point about something that Mike said and that Melanie said. Now, Mike, you were talking about how, he was not obligated to take an action, and whatever his actions were, he was assessing the situation. But I think it was proven in court that he did try to do something. He called for backup. You pointed out that based on the protocols that if he's by himself, he doesn't have to enter the building. But I think ethically, we all are in agreement that he should have entered into that building. The story about not knowing where the shot's coming from. I think the prosecutor said he didn't do anything to search for and confront the shooter. I think that makes a lot of sense. She said that in the closing arguments. So again, if he had gone into the building, maybe just peered in a little bit, he might have had a better idea of where the shots were coming from. And listen, we all know if someone's firing shots and shots start being fired at them, their whole mindset changes. Perhaps that could have ended it right there. It's kind of Monday morning quarterbacking, but doing nothing allowed this maniac to roam those halls of that school and shoot and kill people for 4 minutes and 15 seconds. And then what Melanie said about the fact that the law really was improving based on the fact that he wasn't a caregiver of the children. So I think based on politics, that's why you saw Scott Israel throw him under the bus. There was a lot of things that happened before this maniac entered that school. There was a lot of red flags. They weren't followed. They weren't acted upon. So now we have this horrible tragedy. What are we going to focus on? The fact that Peterson didn't go into the school. And, the investigation revealed that he retreated while children were under attack. And I think that's a very powerful statement. I'm not trying to defend his actions. Believe me, I'm not. I've told Billy off the air that I wouldn't be able to live with myself if I was in his shoes and didn't try and neutralize that shooter. I would have entered the school. I believe that I really would have. I mean, it's easy to say it from sitting where I'm sitting right now, but I know how I was as a cop. Something like that, an active shooter, you got to get to the shooter and you got to try and neutralize him. And again, I'm going to make that point again. When you're being shot at, his mindset is one thing. He's got that big AR-15 and he's firing shots at people and he's in control. He's got all this power. The minute bullets start coming his way, everything changes. His whole mindset changes. And perhaps that could have ended it right then and there. We know what the outcome was. We feel that there was overcharging in this case, and I think the jury got it right.
This is from ABC News. I want to play a little bit of this. Watch how this kid walks by as he's preparing to go into the school.
Douglas High School during the attack. ABC's Ariel Reshef is here with the details on that. Ariel, good morning.
Good morning to you guys. Those images from inside the high school showing the moments leading up to that deadly rampage and a series of apparent security failures by police and school officials. A warning: if there are children in the room, the content here may be disturbing.
Possible shots fired at Stoneman Douglas High School.
This morning, chilling images and 911 calls from the Parkland massacre, painting a timeline of terror. 19-year-old Nicholas Cruz seen here loading an AR-15 in the hallway of Stoneman Douglas High School as a frightened freshman walks past. The Sun Sentinel reporting that according to that freshman, Cruz telling him, "You'd better get out of here. Things are going to start getting messy." Moments later, Cruz killing 17 students and staff.
Oh my God!
The release of surveillance videos and audio, all part of a scathing draft report from a Florida State Commission, shining a light on a host of fateful security missteps.
If we can't protect our children in schools, then who can we protect?
Doors unlocked, the gates open, allowing Cruz to get inside undetected.
He got into the 1200 building because that door was unlocked and unstaffed, and that we say that that is a security failure.
A campus security monitor failing to call a code red after seeing Cruz carrying a rifle bag. The report saying the spray of bullets set off a fire alarm, sending panicked students and teachers out of their classrooms to escape. This picture capturing kids trapped helplessly in a crammed hallway. Meanwhile, cameras showing school resource officer Deputy Scot Peterson waiting outside on his radio instead of trying to stop the gunman.
I think we got shots fired. Also shots fired. 1200 building.
5 minutes go by before police officers even enter the building. Cops using surveillance footage on a 20-minute delay to try to track down the armed assailant who had already escaped, according to the Sun Sentinel.
They are monitoring the subject right now. He went from the 3rd floor to the 2nd floor.
While they tried to locate Cruz, he's seen here a few blocks from campus at this McDonald's. Finally, just under an hour later, taken into custody.
A judge entered a not guilty plea for Nicholas Cruz in March. Since the attack, the sheriff's office says it has made some major changes in policy. The findings and a list of recommendations for school safety will be turned over to the Florida governor, guys, next week.
So many issues here. Not
So
having
many.
a PA system, having a security cameras that are on a 20-minute delay.
Yeah, you have 5 minutes for police to enter the building. So think about what happened in those 5 minutes.
Yeah, hopefully less.
I just love the news, talking about stuff they know nothing about. Oh my God, a 20-minute delay. It just kills me because they have no clue about anything, but they want to editorialize about it. Folks, this is Police Off the Cuff, real crime stories. If you like real crime from a police perspective, you're in the right place. If you're not subscribed, go on our YouTube, hit that subscribe button, give us a thumbs up, and ring that bell. If you want to support us financially, we have a Patreon with 3 different levels, and we also have a YouTube channel membership with 5 different levels. And you see the folks in the green font. They're part of our YouTube channel members, and we really appreciate all of them. So as we could see, there was many. I would imagine, Melanie, you could talk about the civil suits to this.
I have so many things to say right now.
Well, go ahead, Melanie. I'll let you go ahead.
I have so many things to say, and I'm going to say what everybody's thinking, at least in the chat, and what I'm thinking as a mother, as someone who's not trained as a police officer. I have a lot of things to say about this. Number one, the radios that these guys had sucked. I watched the testimony. Their radios sucked. Everybody knew it. He had to go outside to talk on that radio to try and get some comms because he couldn't get comms. That's number one. Number two, he did not run to his car to get a vest like a lot of the other guys did. He stood there and he waited. Number three, it took this disgusting Nicholas Cruz killer somewhere between 4.5 minutes and 6 minutes to kill 17 people. If he had gone into the building, would the outcome have been different? It may have already been done by that time. So to prosecute this guy criminally is, I don't know, as a mother, it even shocks me. I mean, this guy knew these students. He loved them. There's a difference between a legal duty and a moral duty. Okay. Just because somebody may have a moral duty to do something doesn't mean that you can throw them in jail for 100 years because they didn't do something. And also, civil cases for wrongful death may be successful against him. I just think it was a big overreach. It was a huge, huge risk to do this. And the optics are just bad. And I feel bad for the guy. I watched the testimony and I genuinely think, and I'm not a trained police officer, as you know, he may not have known where those shots were coming from. There were multiple buildings and echoes and, I don't know. I feel bad for the guy. That's all I'm going to say. I'll stop now.
That's a lot of really heartfelt information you just gave out. But now I'm going to bring in a heartless guy. Mike,
thank you, Bill.
Well, what are your thoughts on this being a heartless police officer? How do you feel about this?
I thought what Melanie said was excellent. In fact, the distinction between a moral duty to act and a legal duty to act is a huge, wide chasm. And I talk to this about my students. Just because something seems wrong doesn't mean it's legally wrong, and not in all kinds of cases. So we know that the law wasn't really exact as to what his status was as a caregiver, and so we do know that overall that police do not have a specific duty to act to save a particular person unless some sort of special relationship has formed. Like, for instance, if you take into custody an abused child, you have to make sure that they get proper medical care, that sort of thing. As an officer, you think of those child abuse cases you handled, you have to make sure they get proper medical care. Beyond that, you're not responsible for what happens to them afterwards. But so no special relationship existed. He was not considered a caregiver under Florida state law. Look, and I just want everybody in the chat room to realize that, all he had to do was actually go into that building. He might not have been able to save even one person, but he didn't investigate what building. Like, I didn't see him run from one building to another, or even walk from one building to another. And that's what is disturbing to me as an officer. I remember working in the Bronx, working in Manhattan with and Billy, my partner Augie in the Bronx, where many calls running into buildings, shots fired from the roof, shots fired at the third floor apartment, and you don't get a lot of information. And you go there, you just take out your firearm, you and your partner, you do the best you possibly can under the circumstances. You don't know what's going to happen. You do the best you can. And I think for his best that day was lacking. And therefore, everyone and the children paid the ultimate price for his lack of ability that day. But all he had to do was move, and he didn't move. So I have to fault him. And I think that his punishment is going to be, like you say, living with that knowledge that he didn't do anything to try to save those children.
And Mike, I don't really believe that you're heartless.
Thank you, Billy.
I just was trying to add a little levity to this. Fuzzy Doxy, thank you so much for the $9.99 super sticker. And Melanie, I agree with that cute little dog in the picture there, Melanie. They like your passion. They like where you're coming from. I want to play a little bit of Scot Peterson after he was acquitted. Here he is in court. Just think this was going on from a personal point of view, from his personal point of view, for 5 years. Imagine being on the hot seat for 5 years. And he was suspended without pay. I don't know how he supported himself over these last few years.
For not taking action during the shooting at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School almost 5 years ago. He continues to be overwhelmed with emotion.
Don't anybody ever forget this was a massacre on February 14th. The only person to blame was that monster. It wasn't any law enforcement. Nobody on that scene, from BSO, Coral Springs. Everybody did the best they could. We did the best we could with the information we had. And God knows we wish we had more.
What are you saying to the family, Scott? I know it's emotional for them today, too. But this obviously isn't the outcome they wanted. Do you have any response to
You know what I tell the families? I would love to talk to them. I have no problem calling Mark, saying, hey, we want to talk. We'd like to know everything. I'm there. I would have been there from day one. So I'll always be there. If they need to really know the truth of what occurred, and not only my actions, but what occurred, I'm there for them. Me and Lydia, we've mourned with them for 4.5 years. I seen some of these family members, and I'd love to went over to them and hugged them and say, God, I'm sorry. Yeah. But, I know that's maybe not what they're feeling at this point. Maybe now, maybe they'll get a little understanding, but I'll be there for them. I'll be there for them. How could I not?
What about the prosecution? What do you say to the prosecutor's office?
I'll let Mark talk about that.
We are extremely pleased with the outcome today. But understand something.
A very emotional Scot Peterson reacting to the not guilty verdict that was returned to him, saying,
Phil, your thoughts?
Oh, I have some thoughts. I want to just piggyback a little bit what Mike said. Now, obviously, there's a legal ground and then there's an ethical ground. It doesn't seem like he broke any laws based on his actions. But, Mike, you talked about, hearing shots fired, working up in the Bronx. The shit hits the fan. You hear shots. What do? Normally, you're going to take your weapon out and you're going to take cover. It didn't look like he was trying to take cover. He looked very confused in the videos that I saw, running back and forth. Yes, he was on the radio. He was reporting that there were shots fired. But to me, he could have, gone a little further, maybe gotten closer to that building to see where the shots were coming from. Now, the little bit of research that I did today earlier, Cruz entered a third floor teacher's lounge and he tried to shoot through a window that he wanted to make access where people would be running out of the school and then he would just be picking them off. Thank God he was unable to. I believe there was some wire in between the window and he wasn't able to get through to that window. But God forbid he had gotten through that window and had an open shot at a courtyard, let's say, where people were fleeing, it would have really been more horrific than it was. But the point I was trying to make is that it doesn't look like his training kicked in. Whatever training he had as a police officer, you know, you hear shots, you're going to take cover. You're going to try and assess where the shots are coming from, move forward, going in, towards the gunfire, you know. And now, if he felt that the shots were coming towards him, perhaps he might have taken cover. I don't know. But I think all of the things that we see, the evidence that was presented at this trial, legally, no. I don't think he broke any laws, but ethically and morally, yeah, he could have done a better job. Absolutely.
You know something? I just, again, I want to play this Chief Scott Israel. He was interviewed by Jay Tapper on CNN, and I'll just play a little bit of it, and we can comment on it afterwards.
Deputy Scot Peterson. Coral Springs arrived. A group of Coral Springs officers went in within, I think, about 4 minutes. We're projecting after the killer left the campus. I understand that they're going to give statements to us regarding the other 3, 4, 5 deputies. At this point, we have no reason to believe that anyone acted incorrectly or correctly. That's what an investigation is. Everybody's entitled to their own opinion, but nobody's entitled to their own set of facts. We do know, Jake, that Deputy Peterson at the time uttered, he disseminated information over the police radio. We don't know why what those deputies heard. Perhaps they did something by what they heard from Peterson, and that will be, outlined in interviews. We'll get to the truth. But at this point, one deputy was remiss, dereliction of duty, and he's now no longer with this agency.
Yeah,
That's Peterson.
You're saying that because during the time that the shooter was in the school, you say Peterson was the only one there, but that wasn't known at the time. You know that now because of security cameras you saw when he left the school. This is
Correct.
after the fact. But when did your deputies, not Peterson, but the others, when did they arrive on the scene? Because Coral Springs sources say when Coral Springs police arrived, there were Broward deputies there in addition to Peterson.
And I don't dispute that, but that is an active investigation. We have not taken statements yet from the Coral Springs officers. We found out, I believe, 5 or 6 days ago from their police chief that he told one of our colonels about the information. We're going to be taking statements from those Coral Springs police officers. Then we're going to be speaking with our deputies. If any deputies are alleged to have dereliction of duty, we'll look into that. We don't know what the deputies heard on the radio. Coral Springs and the Broward Sheriff's Office, we have different radio systems. So we don't know what one was hearing vis-a-vis what the other was hearing. All I could tell you is we will investigate every action of our deputies, of their supervisors. And if they did things right, we'll move forward. And if they did things wrong, I will take care of business in a disciplinary manner like I did with Peterson.
And just so people who are watching at home understand,
I'm just amazed at how quickly he threw him under the bus without the completion of an investigation. And an investigation like this could take, 6 months to a year to get all the facts in. And, it reminds me of course, again, that horrific job we saw in Uvalde, Texas, where there was no doubt it was definitely a problem with leadership, that there was no leadership telling the officers what to do. And we did many shows on the Uvalde active shooting. And what we had determined was that in a situation like that, the officers don't have to obey the order. If the order is an unlawful order, clearly as it was in Uvalde, don't go in the building. As you hear students getting shot by an active shooter, police officers are only required to obey lawful orders. Mike, back me up here. I don't want to have things thrown at me.
No, Billy, we saw, and we've seen some excellent police responses to active shooter cases. And it's something really done on the ground level, the patrolman and the sergeant. You're not waiting for a chief to tell you what to do. You're paid to think on your feet and to react as quickly as you possibly can. hopefully what you end up doing, it can make, some sort of measurable difference rather than sitting on your hands. But yeah, there was way too much waiting around in Uvalde. I can't imagine working in the 4-6 or 3-0 cops, even if they were unsupervised, just sitting around waiting. They would have been climbing all over that building, climbing in the windows, looking for the shooter.
Mike, they were told to stand down at some point in Uvalde several times. So there was definitely a lack of leadership in that
Yeah,
case.
absolutely.
100%.
Absolutely.
I said when we covered the Uvalde case, you wouldn't have been able to hold back our ESU guys. They
No
would have
way.
been, but their boss would be with them. So
That's right.
ESU, the boss goes in with them, just like the
Plus,
fire
you had a
department.
student inside the school calling 911, and they were transmitting that information that, yes, he's in the room, and the things that were going on. There were people alive, able to communicate through 911 to the officers on the scene. How they held back from that. Like you said, in New York, we think that they probably would have said, the hell with whoever's telling us not to go in, and tried to make an entry. But I guess that's Monday morning quarterbacking. But with all that information in that case, that was a terrible, terrible tragedy.
Let me just go to this little file tape on the Uvalde chief.
Morning in Uvalde, Embattled School Police Chief Pete Arredondo has been fired.
All in favor? Motion passes unanimously.
Emotions among students and families quickly running high.
I have messages for Pete Arredondo and other law enforcement that were there that day. Turn in your badge and step down. You don't deserve to wear one.
Our babies are dead. Our teachers are dead. Our parents are dead.
The termination comes exactly 3 months after a gunman claimed the lives of 19 children and 2 teachers at Robb Elementary. Brett Cross, the uncle and guardian of Uzziah Garcia, says victims like Uzziah deserve justice.
He's never going to graduate from high school. He's never going to have his first date, his first car. None of that. He will forever be 10 years old.
Though absent from the meeting, Arredondo having his say in a lengthy 17-page statement sent to the school board, his lawyer accusing the board of an unconstitutional public lynching, writing the board has not followed proper procedure and refuses to provide a written complaint against Arredondo, adding none of his decisions or actions demonstrate a failure to meet the accepted standards of conduct for law enforcement officers in similarly situated school districts in Texas. Arredondo has faced widespread scrutiny for the delayed response to the shooting. Officials say it took authorities 77 minutes to engage the shooter.
The shots have come in through that wall, so these keys are not opening up this room.
The Texas legislature releasing a fact-finding report last month, faulting the police response for egregiously poor decision-making, adding officers failed to prioritize saving the lives of innocent victims over their own safety. In that report, Arredondo telling the committee he didn't consider himself the incident commander. But Uvalde families glad to see some results even 3 months later.
We did something. We got something accomplished finally.
And no word yet on whether Arredondo plans to appeal this decision. His attorney yesterday afternoon calling for him to be reinstated with back pay and benefits. We did reach out to both Arredondo and his attorney after this decision was announced, but have not heard back.
Melanie, your thoughts here?
I'm not familiar enough with this case to specifically talk specifics about it. And because I think I tend to shy away from these school shooting cases. I don't like them. I don't like to dig into them. So really, this Peterson one was the first one that I've really, aside from Columbine, because I lived in Colorado. And so Columbine was, that's all the way back in 1999. And really what has changed since then? Not a lot. You guys talk about what the NYPD would have done in a situation like this, and you guys are so much more well-trained, right, than this Scot Peterson probably was. I'm going to bet you're at a different level.
But so Melanie,
Uvalde was a whole different animal.
Yeah, but some of these Florida police departments, and they're very well-trained because they get as much violence and as many shootings as we get in New York. Mm-hmm. And especially when you talk about Miami, some of the inner cities of Florida, they're no joke, and some of them are very, very well trained. And I think Broward County is one of the counties in Florida that are very well trained. But you can't teach courage. I'll put it that way. Phil?
Lieutenant Peter Prinzo put a message in the chat. 90% of all gun runs, officers go without a boss. They just go. What he's talking about is we get a call of man with a gun, shots fired, something of that nature. Probably more than 90%, 95% of the time, the officers respond, they take action, they get to the scene, they assess what's going on, or they try to assess what it, and they act instinctively within milliseconds, obviously. In this case, we talked about it almost ad nauseum. It doesn't look like he did that much. He did get on the radio. He did. I think that's probably what saved him in the courtroom, that he did call for backup, saying that there were shots being fired. He wasn't sure where they were coming from or whatever. But, Lieutenant Pete makes a great point. We instinctively, all the things that you learn from the police academy and all your years on the job, it kicks in at that moment when the shit hits the fan, as they say. You're going mostly on impulse, and you're going on reaction, and you're going on your training. And it doesn't look like he. And I bet in that Uvalde case, there was probably 90% of those officers wanted to go in. They were told to stand down several times. And then another agency that was present on the scene, I forgot what agency they were from, a SWAT team said, you know what, we're going in. They went in and they neutralized.
I think it was the Texas Rangers, I think.
Okay.
What's the obsession? Thanks for the $5 super sticker. What does the panel think about Scot Peterson not having any backup when this went down? I asked respectfully, can you imagine facing that without a partner? Well, something, that would be very scary to go against an active shooter by yourself. Absolutely. But, something, you're actually expected to do that. You're not expected to commit suicide. You use tactics and you approach him very carefully, and you try to get on the radio and get back up to where you are. But at the very least, you got to go towards the shots. You can't pretend that you're not hearing them and stay outside with the safety of brick walls between you and the shooter.
Billy, he was clearly outgunned. There's no question about that. He probably had a 9mm. The shooter had an AR-15. But you just made a good point. Using cover, tactics, a brick wall, a staircase, whatever it was, you're not going to walk right into somebody gun blazing and just put yourself out in the open and leave yourself no cover. That's not what you're trained to do. But I think if the shots were further enough away, he could have, gone forward and advanced to see where they were coming from. And listen, if he can get a shot off of the guy, like I said, the whole mindset changes when you're firing shots and now the shots are coming at you. Everything changes. And I think that's what the goal is, to try and, we say neutralize the threat. Fire some shots in his direction. Perhaps he may take off. He may stop shooting, may try to reload his gun, whatever it is. So, again, it's just it doesn't seem like any of that was followed in this case.
ESU used to always tell this story. They would say, there'd be a guy inside an apartment with a gun, and he'd say, I'm not being taken alive. And then they would go, and he'd be, all right, I'll be right out.
Right.
As soon as he heard the slide of
the rack of the shotgun,
he decided life was more important than being a tough guy, And
absolutely.
Let me play a little bit of this from this was an interview with Scot Peterson after
an interview with Scot Peterson, the armed resource officer on duty during the Parkland school shooting. On Tuesday, he shared his moment-by-moment account of what happened that day. Well, today we pick up the story when he found out he was being forced to resign and later would be accused of being a coward.
It was surreal. It was like I didn't know what was going on. It was a shock to me.
They never said, hey, explain your actions here. We have a few questions.
No, nothing. Because I know I didn't violate any policy or procedure. I've been with the agency 32 years. I know the policies. I know the procedures. I communicated right on that scene. I did everything that I felt at the time was appropriate.
You cannot violate policy and procedures and still not get it right.
Right. You're absolutely right.
Is that what happened here?
Exactly. Exactly. I mean, like I said, Savannah, this will haunt me the rest of my life. It will. Because my kid, those were my kids. So, and that's why it hurts the way it does.
8 days after the Parkland shooting, it would be Scot Peterson's last day as a police officer, but he didn't know why until this.
And he never went in.
The captain was driving me home and my phone started, going off saying that, Sheriff Israel is basically, ripping you apart. People started to text me.
What matters is that when we in law enforcement arrive at an active shooter, we go in and address the target. And that's what should have been done.
I can't but help but think that Sheriff Israel did this for political reasons, to save his own ass.
100%.
And it backfired on him, because no good boss would throw their guy under the bus the way he did on a national level. I thought it was particularly despicable. And I've almost, I should say I've never seen an NYPD boss do that. I've seen it done. But for the most part, most big bosses will have your back. But it does depend on the politics. And this became very, very political. Look, Trump made a statement about this. So it was out there on a political level.
He said you did nothing when you clearly knew there was a shooter inside. He said you clearly knew based on what he had seen.
It's not true. It's untrue.
Joe DeRusso is Scot Peterson's attorney.
I don't think a crime scene that's that big, with that many witnesses, with that many people injured, that you could have completed a full investigation within 8 days. I don't think it's possible.
He waited and he didn't want to go into the school.
President Trump weighed in. Did you hear what he said?
Part of it. And President Trump, the only thing I can think is he went on the false narrative of Sheriff Scott Israel. But you know what? We are living in a free country. I mean, it just hurts. That's the commander in chief. That's that's the president. It's tough. I have 2 kids in the military. It's tough. My boys.
This man standing outside of the school the other day doesn't love the children.
The president said he thought a school resource officer doesn't love the kids. That's what he said.
He doesn't know. He wasn't there. It's easy to make comments and say things. In Washington, D.C., you weren't there. You didn't know what I believed and what I assessed and what I heard those first few minutes on that scene. I think it was just easy for them to make me, the punching bag.
This is one of the worst things that's ever happened, one of the worst school shootings. And you're getting blamed for not stopping it.
If I knew everything, I would have been in there and engaging that shooter. And you know what? Hopefully I would have shot him. He might have shot me. I don't know the what ifs, but it's been hard. I mean, but it's nothing compared to what these families went through. They lost their kids, and kids were killed and injured. They lost them. I'm alive. I mean, going through what I went through, it's horrifying, because as a police officer, if you're a coward, that's the worst label you could have as a police officer. And
100%. I don't think there's any worse label you can have put on you as a cop than being a coward, or not backing up your fellow law enforcement officer, or not rising to the occasion in a situation like this. I don't think there is anything worse. He's right. But again, with this whole case, I feel he's been punished a lot already. And I think that the rest of his life he's going to be punished, just with this memory of perhaps the guilt of inaction. And if he truly feels no guilt, then that's it. That's his thoughts. Maybe he needs to feel that. But I would think a lot, from what I've seen, a lot of the families, a lot of the parents, I don't think they're going to want to talk to him about his feelings after this trial. And I don't know if it gets any better for a parent that lost their child in a situation like this. Melanie?
No, I mean, I don't think you'd ever get over losing your child, ever. I don't think so.
Yeah, Billy, nobody expected Scot Peterson to be Superman that day, but he didn't actually try to enter that building, look around, and go from building to building. You and I and Phil, we respond to these calls. You don't know if you're going to get there in time to save someone's life, or you're going to get there and you're going to find a person who's just been killed 30 seconds before you got there. You don't know. You do the best you can. If he had only entered the building and tried and he didn't. And, he did what was, less than what was expected of him. We didn't expect him to be a hero, but expect him to do something. And I think that's what the whole prosecution was basically calling 911 and saying we got a shooter, or calling a code red. Okay, that's fine. Phil pointed that out. Maybe that was something that really played in his to his advantage. But if that's all you could possibly do with 30 years experience on the police department, I have to just shake my head. It's a sad, terrible situation, ordeal for everyone concerned, especially those parents who lost their children.
100%. Phil, want to do a quick commercial here?
Sure. Joe Murray, attorney at law. Joe Murray is a criminal defense attorney in the New York City area. He's also a retired 15-year member of the NYPD. He was also on the boxing team. So if you have need for a criminal defense attorney, perhaps Joe Murray can deliver that knockout punch on your case. If you want to reach Joe, his website is jmurray-law.com. His telephone number is 646-838-1702, or you could email Joe at joe@jmurray-law.com. I have Joe's phone number in my phone, and if you're in the New York area, you need some criminal defense attorney, whether it be just a consultation, or if you do have an active case, Joe's your man.
No, I'm calling 1-800-MELANIE.
I like that.
We have to have a little levity here. Oh my God, look at this Schmitty.
Schmitty
Thank
with
you
the
so
super
much.
chat. Thank you.
Being in the field of communications and decisions made in the moment without a team, while there is fault, it's in the moment. People do their best. I feel for this guy, haunting. I can relate. Schmitty, to tell you the truth, I feel for him too, but I have to be play devil's advocate. And I think he didn't do the right thing. I didn't think he had a good day that day. Let's put it that way. I don't think he did a good job. He didn't do his best job that day.
How much do you think they were paying him? I'm
Out
just
of
He
curious.
was
What
on
do you think his
Broward
salary
County.
was he a retired police
no,
No,
officer?
I don't think he was active. He was active in the Broward County Sheriff's Office.
Yeah,
right?
he was
Okay,
in
I'm just
31
wondering.
years.
'Cause I don't think these guys get paid enough. Is he getting paid $20 an hour? Like, I don't know what these guys are making.
He probably makes about 130, 140,000 a year.
Yeah, he's got to be in that category for sure.
Yeah.
30 years on the job, maybe even 150. But listen, whatever the pay scale is, and it's about the training, I think, is probably, he's going to have to live with himself. We've said that numerous times, and I can't stress it enough, because I think of the mindset of the shooter. He's in control. He's got the power. He's firing all these shots, and he's in control, and he's killing people. And I'm telling you, if one or two bullets come his way, it just changes the whole dynamic. And that may have saved lives. And listen, in 4 minutes and 15 seconds, doesn't seem like a long time. But, I mean, you hear the shots going off. A lot of shots were fired there. I think the fact that perhaps, from what I read, they think his rifle jammed, and that's when he exited the school. He couldn't get through that window that they were talking about, where he wanted to open up on the people that were fleeing the school. So I don't know. I just feel like, that changes everything. If there's shots coming your way, everything that you planned upon, you didn't plan upon, now the realization of self-preservation kicks in. You don't want to die. I mean, it's a natural instinct. You're being shot at now. It changes everything. Your plan goes right out the window, and now maybe you want to escape. And I think that, unfortunately in this case, there was no challenge to this, excuse my language, this scumbag maniac.
I just want to clarify something that I said, because I was not insinuating that he was thinking about money in the moment. That is not what I was saying. What I was saying was that I think that all law enforcement should be paid a lot more than they are for risking their lives every single day to go to work.
Thank you.
Because a lot of people are paid a lot more money to not risk their lives every day to go to work. So I just don't think it's enough, whatever it is.
No, that's for sure.
Another thing I was thinking as I watched them read the verdict, because that was really, really hard to watch. I mean, when they read the verdict, I thought that's the video you were going to show earlier when you showed him being interviewed after they read the verdict, was, oh my God, this guy's only 54 years old.
No, but now he's 60. Because he was 54 when this
time.
started.
Yeah.
When it started. Now he's
well, I'm sure he's aged a lot in the past 5 or 6 years
definitely
also,
has
just
aged
from
I just want to bring up a concept, and I think you guys, the former members of the service, know. And there's a concept of the police being a warrior or a public servant. And I would like to think of myself, and I think Phil, as we were warriors on the NYPD. But there's many people that go on the job to be public service. And believe it or not, the city government wants you to be a public service. They want you to shake hands, kiss babies, and do aided cases. They don't want crime fighters. But sometimes you're forced into being a warrior in situations like this. And let's face it, a school resource officer is not a warrior by that job. A certain type of personality takes that job, wants to be the school, and a kinder, gentler community policing type officer. Definitely not a warrior type. Professor Mike, you want to comment on that?
Yeah, Billy, as you go, becoming a rookie and you figure out what you want to do, how you want to approach crime. Yeah, your personality is part of it. If you're combative, you want to make a lot of arrests, and that's what people do. God bless the cops. We have plenty of them. Depending on how you view life, what you want to do with your career, you might just want to walk a foot post, go to school at night, do something like that. But yeah, when the shots are fired, and you're the one standing there in a blue uniform, you got to stop kissing the babies. You got to take out your firearm. You got to address the situation. And that's just the way it goes. Absolutely. And once, as Phil's right, we know this from seeing these school shooters, is that the moment a bullet comes flying in their direction, they usually cease what they're doing because it changes their entire world outlook instantly. And that's the most effective thing you do. Just one bullet in their direction. And that's what Scot Peterson failed to do.
Scott, he's an NYPD detective. School resource officer, wants to give out pizza and hugs, not be a cop. I couldn't have said it better myself. I don't want to be that harsh in this situation because I think we all have sympathy for Officer Scot Peterson. And I think I didn't want to see him go to jail or get convicted. I really didn't. I think he's suffered enough. But I think if I was a parent of one of these kids, I perhaps would feel differently. And I would want my piece of meat, so to speak, in this. And I wouldn't be happy that he didn't get convicted. But as Melanie said early on in the beginning of the show, this was an overreach. They way overcharged because it was politically driven charges. Melanie.
Yeah, I think they just wanted somebody else to blame. But, they had warnings about this shooter. I mean, let's look at that. Where are those people who knew about this kid, who knew that he was going to go shoot up the school? They were warned about this. They knew about, there are so many other layers of failures that happened before this shooting that it got to a place where this monster walked into a school and killed 17 people. So I think that there are a lot of other failures here, and hindsight is 2020. And could he have done more? Yes. If he had done more, would it have changed the outcome? We don't know. But it would have changed the outcome if somebody intervened and got to Nicholas Cruz and threw him in juvie or was able to do something to prevent this from happening. It was already
Melanie,
happening when
the
Peterson
Broward
was
County
involved.
Melanie, the Broward County Police said that they responded to 23 jobs to his residence, and and according to them, they didn't. I'd like to investigate those jobs and see what happened. The law didn't allow them to arrest him apparently for what he did in those incidences. I don't know what the incidents were, but it would seem to me, at the very least, if he's making threats, you should check to see if he has any weapons. And
Well, we heard that 911. the 911 call that you played in the beginning. Remember, there was a woman who said, "You need to get over here. He's got a lot of weapons. He already held a gun to his brother's head. So I know
Right.
that he's a problem," right? Wasn't that referring to him?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I wonder why they didn't take his guns from him. That's,
Yeah. So they knew. I mean, based on that, and that woman, by the way, on the 911 call was very, blasé about the whole thing. It was that's just another Tuesday for her. Like, oh yeah, he held a gun to his brother's head, so you might want to come over here and maybe do something about it.
crazy. Mary Michael, thanks for the $9.99 super sticker. It will always be questions if he did right or wrong. It will always haunt him, and it will always be easier to be a critic than an actor. Would love to think I would run to help out, but Mary Michael, you're right. And all of us could say, oh, I would have ran into that building. I would have put my S on my shirt and ran right up to him. But, something I can tell you that we would do that because we've done it before. So I'm not talking, I'm not talking out of school.
But then you look at a guy who does do something, right? Like Daniel Penny on the New York City subway, and look at what's happening to him. He did step up. He did do something. He tried to protect people. Now they're going to try him for murder.
Good
So
point.
it's like, you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. Like, people don't know what to do anymore. People are so confused because it's just like, oh, well, I could go to jail if I do something. I could go to jail if I don't do something. It's like so messed up.
Billy, can I make a point? You were talking about the warrior and the civil service. I always felt that there were 4 classes of police officers. Super cop, that 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, all they thought about was making a collar. There were the active guys. There was the guys that had family, showed up to work, did what they had to do to get by, and then there were total zeros. So there's 4 categories. I put myself in the active category. I was always never afraid to make an arrest or take a collar. I don't think I was a super cop. I'm not putting myself in that category. But even if you're the civil servant, the one that comes to work just to do the job or to do nothing, when the shit hits the fan, you become a warrior sometime. I'm going to mention a police officer, Maura Smith. I don't know her from before 9/11. She was killed on 9/11. I don't know if she was a warrior, she was a super cop, or if she was just come to work and do the job. But she put on gloves. She was helping aides. She had gone in and out of the trade center 3 and 4 times, and then the buildings collapsed on her and she was killed. So sometimes, even if you're that civil servant, you're not the warrior. When the shit hits the fan, you become the warrior. The training kicks in. Maura Smith got in there. She got her hands dirty. She was helping bloody people come out of that building. She went in 3 and 4 times, and unfortunately, she lost her life. But in this case, it just there was a lot left to be desired by the actions of Peterson.
100%. Schmitty, thanks again for the $5 super sticker all-star panel. I appreciate your expertise and engagement. Gold. Thank you. A++++. Amen. Mary Michael. Thank you so much, Schmitty. Guys, I think that we covered this pretty damn well, and I wanted to cover this with as much sensitivity as possible. And I don't agree that Officer Scot Peterson did a good job that day. I think that he didn't do what he was supposed to do. That's my feelings. But at the same time, I don't want to beat him to death. He's already been beaten down. It's like the old expression, don't beat a dead horse. He's already been punished, and he's going to be punished for the rest of his life with just the 14 faces of the kids that lost their lives and the 3 adults that lost their lives. And the potentiality that had he done something different, maybe he could have saved a couple of those lives. Maybe nothing would have changed. But you always second guess yourself. I'm going to go around the panel and I'm going to give everyone final words. I might as well go to my right next to me, the beautiful attorney Melanie Little. Melanie, your final thoughts.
Well, first I want to say that I think you are all super cops in my eyes. So Phil, despite what you think, you are a super cop, all 3 of you. And
1-800-Melanie.
And
She's
as
our girl.
always,
She's our girl.
our thoughts and prayers are with the families of the victims. I can't imagine what they are going through, what they will have to live with for the rest of their lives, having lost children and family members. And it's horrifying on so many levels. And that's pretty much my final thoughts on this.
Okay. And Professor Mike, and I didn't mean that you're heartless, Mike. I just because sometimes I hear it in the chat. People say, you know something, Cannon, you pick on Professor Geary too much. Stop picking on him. I don't pick on him.
Your conscience is getting to you, Billy. This is your conscience.
People don't understand cop humor sometimes. But anyway, Mike, your final thoughts.
I got some very, very sensitive fans, Billy. I want to let you know that. No, I just want to say what Melanie hits on something really excellent is that there was so many failures in this case, Nicholas Cruz case, all the way going back several years before it actually happened. People calling the authorities and letting them know this guy's a monster, this guy's crazy, this guy may just actually go into a school and shoot it up. Scot Peterson happened to be the last person in line holding the hot potato when it blew up. And for that, he gets, he's on trial. But many other people could have lost their jobs, been fired, been reprimanded, and made fun of and scapegoated. But unfortunately, it all falls on his shoulders.
Pretty good final thoughts, Mike. And now we're going to go to straight out of Brooklyn, Phil Grimaldi. Your final thoughts, Phil.
Final thoughts. I don't want to diminish what Peterson was faced with. He was faced with a horror. I mean, an active shooter is probably the worst thing you could come upon in policing in this country. I mean, let's face it, this is a homicidal maniac that's killing innocent kids in school. Think about it. And he has to go up against this. Now, I get it, but our training comes into play. We know that we need to act. We need to go towards the shooting, go towards the shooter, and try and neutralize the shooter. I made the point, Mike brought it up. Sometimes one or two shots in the direction of the shooter might change the whole dynamic. We don't know what would have happened had he entered that school and fired some shots in the direction of the mass shooter, the maniac, the psycho, homicidal killer. But we did see that he did radio for help, but we don't think that he acted with enough priority to try and stop what was taking place. Again, I don't think he was criminally responsible. I think that the jury came with the right decision. And unfortunately, those lives were lost, and he's going to live with that for the rest of his life. And that's probably going to be his sentence, that he's going to live with it for the rest of his life.
Absolutely. I want to thank our panel tonight, Attorney Melanie Little, Professor Michael Geary, and retired NYPD detective and straight out of Brooklyn, Phil Grimaldi. And you guys, I want to thank all of our fans, our subscribers, our friends. Thank you so much for tuning in tonight. Police Off the Cuff, Real Crime Stories. Have a great night, everyone.
Stay safe, everyone.
Good night, everyone.
One episode just ain't enough.